to Business and Politics. We're talking to Mr. Rommel. Can I just go back to your lolo for a minute, because you gave me a little detail there that reminded me of the thing that we were talking about before the program, which is really the nature of the business that makes it very difficult, which is you have to be in a location where there's a lot of traffic, and in the Philippines those are shopping malls, right? And yet the shopping malls, they have their own business model, and sometimes it makes it challenging for you. But it's interesting that your lolo had something similar. It wasn't a shopping mall, but he operated in a property that was not his, and it became difficult now for continuing that business. Can you talk about that? You were saying that symbiotic relationship. What is the nature of that business, for a restaurant owner? How is it going now? What can be better? What are the challenges?
In terms of perspective, I'm blessed to have seen the late 70s, the early 80s, 90s up to now, and I saw the evolution of how restaurants used to be freestanding.
Yeah.
And then in 86, of course, the super malls came in.
Yeah.
And you have to adapt.
Yeah.
And I think to your question, the answer would be, that the landlords would have to recognize the significant role that restaurants are playing in the lives of the Filipino people.
Yeah.
And it would really be great if restaurant owners would be understood from that perspective, how difficult it is and very challenging, especially now after the pandemic, to run a restaurant.
Yeah.
Even in the States, when they talk about restaurants, the first thing that they talk about in conferences, in articles, is the difference of restaurant businesses from other types of businesses in terms of margins.
Yeah.
And how detailed and meticulous it needs to be operated.
I'm not an expert in this, but from what I understand, from the little that I've read, it's a business that you really have to pay it, that you have to be hands-on. Is that right? I mean,
yes,
because as you said, the margins are thin, and if you're not careful, it can easily run out of control, right? And that's why I was thinking, with this other factor now, that it's beneficial for restaurants to be in malls, how does that expense now impact the already thin margins that you already operate in? And that should that be, how should people who want to go into business like you, how should they, sometimes that's something that they don't think about. They only think about, the quality of the food, maybe the service. They don't think about these other things like rent, right, and operating costs, right?
I think on the macro level, for in terms of framework that I can share with people, when you open up a restaurant business, and I would say to a certain degree it also applies to other businesses, you have to consider three things.
Okay.
Number one is the brand.
Okay.
The brand aspect of it. Nobody taught us that. Because we're restaurant operators basically.
Right.
And we didn't understand that when you put up a restaurant, it is actually a brand.
Right.
It has a brand name, all of these technical things that, they don't teach you when you're a restaurant operator. So it's how to get the skill and the competency to start up, promote, and sustain a brand.
Okay.
And then number two is, I think the most important aspect, that it will require leadership of people.
Okay.
That in the business, it's leading people and managing resources.
Okay.
You don't actually manage people, especially in the context of, the human behavior and all the other factors that come into employing people, right?
Sure.
And then lastly, it's managing the business.
Okay.
So if you translate it into the restaurant framework that I share with others, it's actually having a signature dish that would represent your brand, a signature experience that would also represent your brand. As you know, there are different sectors: QSR, fast casual, fun casual, polished casual, and then fine dining, and etc. Right? So it's understanding the business model that would work for you. So it needs to be a profitable and sustainable and scalable business model. That's where I think rent comes in. understanding what the benefits are of opening outside the mall, opening inside the mall. And when you open inside the mall, it's very important for you to run at least a 5-year P&L or a 5-year income statement, not just a 1 to 2 to 3 year P&L.
That long, right?
Considering the escalation that would happen, the standard mall rate would be about 10% escalation starting on the second year, and then the basic rent plus percentage of rent that you have to remit to the malls.
Right.
All
so
of these
most
things,
people don't realize that when they go into the restaurant business. So it's not just the rent. For some, there's also a percentage of sales.
Yes.
Or is that standard?
Standard, yes, standard.
Or can you negotiate that? Or
well, it depends on your leverage. If you're a bigger brand,
I see.
some would give like a straight percentage rent, but
Right.
you know, that's more of an exception than the rule.
I see.
The rule would be basic plus 5%.
Wow.
So all of these things you have to consider. In the Philippines, a lot of foreign investors would say the labor is relatively more affordable.
Okay.
But they don't consider they don't factor in the rent.
The rent,
It's
yeah.
the dynamics of the rent here in the Philippines.
And sometimes that's what kills a business, right? I mean, even though your restaurant's good and you don't factor it in, then you're surprised. But I'm surprised. 5-year income statement, projected income statement. But you know, from what I understand, again, correct me if I'm wrong. My impression was that many restaurant businesses don't even last that long because it's as you said, it's a tough business, right? Margins are thin. You have to be hands-on, and then there's so many other issues that you deal with. What can you do to make sure that you at least last that initial projection?
I think it's a circular thing. Like, you know, the reason why they don't last is because they didn't really project for the 5-year.
Yeah,
and
they didn't
do
plan.
the number crunching, consider all the factors. When you go into the mall, it's of course beneficial because foot traffic is significantly different.
Yeah.
But you also have to consider your target market.
Yeah.
The limitation of the malls is that it closes at a certain time.
Right.
We noticed that especially now after the pandemic, a lot of people are going out later,
Right.
eating dinner later. And of course, the phenomenon of the BPOs and all the other, the gig economy,
Yeah.
all of the other different jobs that people take on. The traffic, of course, is a consideration in Metro Manila. So all of these factors should be put into consideration.
So if someone like me who wants to go into a restaurant business, what would be maybe the top things that I would keep in mind? You mentioned the importance of planning, the concept of knowing your business, that there's actually a brand, right? Not more than something. But what else should I consider or think about if I want to go into it?
Yeah, I think the simplest way that I would put it, because it's the way I also look at it,
Sure.
is from the income statement standpoint.
Okay.
So top line is sales.
Okay.
So that's where branding comes in.
Right.
That's where marketing will come in. You know, if you're not an expert in marketing, we should consider, enlisting the help or maybe even partnering with somebody who really knows marketing. Especially now, marketing is different.
Right.
I always recognize that I'm not the market of my restaurants anymore.
So it's not just
anymore.
it's not just good that I think I'm confident about my food. It's not enough, right?
It's a good starting point,
Yeah.
but you have to recognize the other moving parts, particularly the business aspect of it. After the sales, you'd have, how do I, what sales would I be bringing in? You have to categorize it into dine-in sales, delivery sales. That's because that's going to be a factors that you would have to consider for choosing your location, right?
Sure.
And then number 2 would be food cost. That's the biggest cost factor in the Philippines, particularly compared to other markets. If you put together a menu, is the menu going to be easy to source? Supply chain is a big consideration in the Philippines, given the traffic, the cost of trucking, the cost of gasoline and diesel, right? And then after food costs, it's the labor cost.
Yeah, but you were saying that when you went into business, the thing that caught my attention was you saw an opportunity because you said the wings was not that valuable
At the time,
right? And of course now it's
it's prime cut.
it's prime cut now. But did you see that opportunity, and then you built a business around it, or there was some other sequence to how you got started?
I think the biggest, that was not the biggest factor, but that was one of the
Because you're saying the retirement, the security, the financial security was the initial thing, right?
Yeah, and also with regards to the concept of wings, we felt that it is still a segment that nobody has really focused on.
Okay.
We anticipated that there will be a focus on specialized cuisine.
Okay.
Because it used to be, when you talk about restaurants, American restaurant would have a very big menu, right?
Yeah.
Everything American. So we saw that the opportunity to open wing joints or smaller restaurants that would really be, and I think up to now that's one of our assets or our strengths, that we're able to operate a kitchen that is very small with a simple menu that's easy to put out. The food is easy to put out.
Yeah.
So it's fast serving time, as we would say, great food, ice cold beverages, fast serving time, service that connects, which leads into tangible value of experience. So even at that time, we were cognizant of the importance, being restaurant operators, of the importance of having your main product available year-round. And at that time, as you mentioned, it was one of the cheaper cuts of the chicken. So we built on that.
Yeah.
But of course, it evolved through the years.
Right. How do you prepare or incorporate innovation? Because I mean, since you've been in business since 2009. I mean, do you look at changing the menu or maybe adding some flavored wings? How important is that? Because you want people to keep coming back. You have probably some signature dishes, but also you're probably thinking that people get tired of the same thing after a while, right? So how do you plan for something like that?
Well, innovation is definitely part of it, but I think the precursor or the prerequisite, I would say, of innovation is actually listening to your customers.
Okay.
And listening to the customers of other restaurants as well.
Okay.
I think that's one big lesson that we learned early.
How do you do that? Do you talk to them, or you're actually there and you talk to customers, or you do a survey, or?
Yeah, being a restaurant manager myself for a long time, I knew the value of table visits, being in the restaurants,
interacting with the
training your frontliners to get feedback, and what we call in the Buffalo Wings and things, not being transactional, but more of building positive relationships. It differentiates you from the transactional nature of a fast food restaurant, for example. And more importantly, I think it's also doing committing time, being disciplined about doing research, not only about the restaurant industry in the Philippines, but also abroad. What's happening, what are the trends, knowing which countries are actually pioneering. Used to be America, but now it's different. The trends are in Asia.
Interesting.
The trends are in Asia now.
Interesting.
So you would see a lot more Asian restaurants being brought to the Philippines, and Philippine restaurants being brought to the US.
Yeah.
So it's the other way around now, because the technology has been transferred, and given the advanced culinary taste of the Filipinos, our palates are more advanced. We're used to more complex flavors.
Yeah.
So I think the world is realizing now that the Southeast Asia in particular is a very attractive region rather to get culinary ideas from.
Interesting. We have to take a quick break, but let me just ask you very quickly, because I just got back from the UAE and I saw Jollibee there and Pancake House and other Filipino brand restaurants. Are you looking to expand abroad?
Yes, definitely.
Right. Okay. We'll be right back with Business and Politics. We're talking to Mr. Rommel now.